Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code play100. That's code play100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Steering wheel. Left steering wheel, yeah. Steering wheel. Hey. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on. Whoa.
Do you like my face? You like it?
How the f*** that's supposed to be?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? From the radio. Ralph, acknowledge. Now, come on, close him down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track down the Hanger Straight.
I am so annoyed.
Welcome back to the Parc Fermé for podcast number 739, the Austrian Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on a race review weekend.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. But before reviewing the Austrian Grand Prix, I have to introduce my co-host, which of course means...
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, welcome back. You know, you went up to the Glen, you got a podium, you hang around a week, come rocking back up. Boom.
What you know about rolling down?
There he is, man. Another podium. Yeah,
Yes.
well done.
Thank you.
You were out there beating and chasing and racing that effervescent Jeff Westphal.
Yes. He was chasing us this time. So
that's great. So Roman and Ross, right? That's who you
Roman
had in the car?
Ross. Yep, because we had the 6 hour and Ian was in for the 6 hour, and then we're back to our normal pairing with Ross and Roman for the shorter sprint race, part of the Sprint Cup Championship. So
yeah, you guys are a points leader, huh?
We are the points leaders. Yes,
it's awesome.
I know. Isn't it crazy?
It is
pretty fun.
Yeah, I thought your buddy Calvin there, he was offering a few platitudes to the team and was saying, how Ian said bringing in Turner, helping with setup was good, and you guys are building a good data notebook and getting a head
around the car now. So it's the car right now. The car's a lot better from the beginning, So because that data bank, you can't force that. You have to just keep going and trying different things. So yeah. So it's fun. It's fun to be a part of that whole thing.
That's awesome. Well, great result. And I happen to know that you were on a 20-hour journey just trying to get home.
The brutality of flying nowadays is...
Oh, my God.
I've never seen anything like it. Yeah,
it's just
terrible.
Nuts.
Yeah, getting crew to and from the races has proven to be extremely problematic. So drive, don't fly if you can. That's all I'm saying. Let's try to figure this thing out before everyone starts jumping on planes.
Crazy.
It's terrible.
Well, that's while you were up there getting a podium in the wilds of New York, there was a Grand Prix in Austria.
Oh, was that? Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's a beautiful area too. Yeah.
It's like a postcard over there, Austria.
Yeah, Austria is a very, Say Watkins Glen area is a very beautiful place too. So.
It is indeed. Yeah, it's very nice. So I thought we'd talk about the Austrian Grand Prix on podcast 739 and all of its exciting glory. But before we get into talking about the teams as they finish, let's get into the big talking points that came out of this weekend that has lots of chins wagging, lots of tongues wagging, a lot of rag chewing over this whole issue of penalties and outside passes and license and points off license. The reality of it is, and I'm not trying to be controversial here. I'm not trying to start what you would call in your native tongue, Paul, a controversy.
Yes.
I am, I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm not trying to be that guy. But if memory serves correct, it always seems like when Derek Warwick is a guest steward, there's always like a lot of penalty stuff going on.
I think you're right, actually. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And somebody check me on that. But I'm telling you, every time I hear that Derek Warwick is the steward, I feel like on that weekend, all of a sudden we're picking fly poop out of pepper, you know?
Yeah. We need to get Nelson Piquet as a steward, and then there will be no penalties, although there will be a couple of lawsuits.
Right.
But yeah. Right. I just remember Derek as a driver. I used to see him race Formula 3 and stuff. He was a pretty clean, neat driver, but it does seem like being the driver steward, you would think he would lean more towards openness of driving antics on track, understanding what it's like and where you are and what the consequences are.
Yeah, I kind of feel like
he seems to be the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the past, he certainly has been all about scrapping the blue flag rules and letting them race, and he certainly had those comments. I can think of 2013, 2015, reading some comments about that. And you would think that he would be, but it just seems like, he felt like, well, they're not calling this enough. And I was kind of like, I don't know. So let's talk about it. He had 11 drivers total hauled to the FIA after this race. I mean, it's like, really? And so 8 drivers got penalties out of this. Now, I want to talk about the non-passing penalties first.
Okay, let's go for it.
You had Vettel for impeding Fernando and Quali. Okay. You had Giovinazzo for overtaking during the safety car. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Then you had Lando for forcing Perez off the track. You had Perez forcing Leclerc off track. We'll get into those in a minute. You had Yuki crossing the white line at pit entry twice. You had Kimi causing a collision, punting Vettel.
That was bad.
You had Latifi not respecting double yellows, and you had Mazepin not respecting double yellows.
Anybody. Not respecting the sport or people in general.
That's strange. I wonder what's causing all the accidents.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you've got all this going. I want to talk about the non-passing first. To be fair, Paul, the FIA, for as long as I can remember, have always taken that white line at pit entry and pit exit damned seriously, as they should.
Right.
So that doesn't surprise me for Yuki. And I remember us talking, this has been a few years ago when you were still at Sonoma, and we were talking about that white line and pit exit and how critical, those pit entry and pit exits are to safety. And why, I can remember in past, remember the 90s, I remember Schumacher touching a white line with a tire and getting a penalty. Yep. They don't mess around with it, and they never have, So I understand that on Yuki, and when you do it twice,
it's pretty bad on him.
Bad on him, Thought he'd learn his lesson.
Yeah. I mean, what happens there is if you get below the white line, it obviously hinders your speed through that turn 8, is it? Or turn 9? I can't remember that first. So he was not very good of Yuki. No.
Yeah.
A bit sloppy.
Kimi causing a collision. I could see that.
It was kind of sloppy also.
That was kind of sloppy. And look, not respecting and slowing down to double yellows, that's kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. I get it, because I'm sure it's frustrating in the end, especially around a track as short as Austria is, just like you're constantly just getting out of the way, But.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's and overtaking during a safety car. Yeah, you can't do that.
Right.
So and impeding Fernando and quali for Vettel. I understand that they'd given the rule that 9 and 10 they couldn't be backing everybody up to get space, and yet they were, and so that's all frustrating. It's weird that they said, yeah, well, there was like 3 or 4 cars all backing up at that time, but Vettel was the first one, and he was clearly wrong. It's like, well, if there were 3 or 4 cars, then all of them should get penalties. Why pick on Zeb alone, because it was a concertina effect in that case.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. So those are the non-passing. So all of those get, and so you have all these penalties, and you're taking points off the license, and now everybody's talking about these point system on the license and how that needs to be fixed because you got Lando now that's only got 2 points left, needs a race ban and all that. But let's talk about the passing. I thought this was really kind of the biggest conversation coming out of this weekend was the outside pass. You had Lando versus Perez, where Lando pushed Perez out wide into the gravel. He gets a penalty 20 laps later. It took him 20 laps to give that penalty out. You can't imagine, gosh, that wouldn't affect strategy, would it? And then you have Perez versus Leclerc twice. Right? In short, Michael Massey said the stewards felt that all 3 cases a car's width should have been left. While that's been the recent notion, I'm curious if this is much easier said than done. And so you and I were talking about this before the podcast. So for our listeners and viewers, I want to try to explain what I'm thinking here. It's if you and I were going into a corner and you came rocking up on the outside of me, and we went into that corner, and I've already gone through the braking zone, and I'm letting off the brake to make the apex, is it a lot easier to say, oh, well, there's Paul, all of a sudden I've got to change and make a much shallower entry, and depending on how much rolling speed I have through that corner, I could, if I'm trying to turn more, I'm doing a Massa, I could have oversteer or understeer, right? If I turn more, I could lose the back end. And trying to now change the trajectory of how I'm going through that corner on the racing line because you're there seems difficult to do. In my mind, I'm not a professional driver. That seems easier to say than to do. To that point, is it realistic to think that magically you come flying up outside as I'm going through a corner, that I can just magically change my trajectory through a corner? Given the speed I'm at, the car, the traction, the grip levels, everything, aero, all of that. I can't jam on the brakes more and give you more space and turn sharper into that corner. So I wanted to ask you, as a professional driver, is that realistic, or is that basically saying, well, if anyone comes up on the outside of you, you're pretty much going to have to give a car away and concede the corner?
Yeah.
Or does it change if you're on the inside and you're there and I see you, I've got to give you room at the apex? Or is it a case of it depends on when you're there? If you're there at the entry of the corner versus if you're only there coming out of the exit of the corner, right? So there's a lot of different elements at play here. It's easy to say, I've seen a lot of journalists say, well, if you're brave enough to try to make an outside pass, you got to realize it's a low percentage pass, and you're oftentimes going to come out on the losing end of that. Is that fair?
Yeah. Which one do I answer here?
I know there's a lot, right?
Right. So let's just go back to the basic of driving to a corner, right? So if you're a Formula One driver or any other decent racing driver, whenever you turn into a corner, you're on the limit. You should be on the limit of your car and taking the ultimate line through the corner. If you're on that limit, the car limit, and you do something different, like if you lift off the power, if you turn the wheel more, then you're going to unbalance the car and could potentially spin. Think of all these, look back to all the Vettelisms we saw, right? A lot of that was due to Vettel getting off the power to give someone enough room, and then that transfers load to the front, becomes a pivot point, the back end comes around, and he spins around, right?
Right.
You don't want to be that guy, right?
Right.
But it really does depend on where in the corner this person shows themselves. If they show themselves in the first third of a corner, certainly in this 4-5 segment, you are now basically where they ran off the road was when the Vic was back under power. It wasn't under braking, right? It was basically under power, and you would normally track out to use all the road you can to maximize the radius of the corner. Do you have to at that point? No, you don't. Can you choose to not give as much throttle, and so therefore you can have a tighter line on the exit to give room? Yes, you can. Could Lando have done it? Yes. Could Perez have done it? Could Leclerc have done it? Yes. Right, in those first two incidents, I believe. Do they have the right to the corner? You know, it's racing, right? And I'm not going to sit here and say, well, they should have just given room, because honestly, in my racing career, I would say 90% of the time I wouldn't give people that room on the outs if they were trying to pass me on the outside, because you just unwind the wheel and you can choose to back off, you know, and tuck in behind me, or you can choose to go off the road. And that was usually the options I gave people. They didn't like either one usually, right? But with open wheel cars, it's a little bit different, because obviously I drove touring cars, and open wheel cars is a bit more treacherous to be banging with people if you start making those fights. So you've got to be a bit more careful there. I definitely don't. So should it be penalized? That's my question. Not that did Lando have an option, because I think he did. And I think Charles had an option too. But should you be penalized for getting your elbows out and fighting for your position? You know, if we saw some other corners where there was runoff, right? And someone ran everyone out. I think, was it Perez ran out there? There's a few times where we saw in turn one, guys were forced out there and ran out there.
Yes.
And there was no penalties for that, right? Right. The penalty here is because of the corner and what the outcome was.
Yeah, you can't penalize outcomes. You cannot penalize outcomes.
So if you force someone off, it should be all the same, no matter what, whether it's a white line and tarmac or it's grass or it's gravel, really.
Yeah, right.
So I think they're inconsistent. So they basically penalized on the outcome of running out on the road. I feel like, you know, unless it's something egregious, these guys should be able to, you know, fight for their right to party and for them to sort it out amongst themselves. You know, we've talked endlessly about eliminating penalties, because penalties, you know, just kill races, and no one wants to be driving around having to serve penalties all race long. So I think you need to have a balance there. And now what are we looking at? On the other side, what are we looking at is, can no one now make an outside pass? Because if they try it, then every driver has the right just to run them off into the gravel. I want to see people fighting. I want to see good passes. I want to see good attempts. But if every time someone makes a decent attempt, and we know how difficult it is to pass now, and not in the DRS zone, you know, no one's going to make those attempts anymore, because you know, they know they're going to get run off the road, and basically they're just going to lose out. So the
little bit of a fine line, because if you're saying every time you go to the outside, the person on the inside can just punch you out wide, okay, that's understandable. On the converse side of that argument, if every time someone comes up the outside of you, you've got to radically change your line instantly inside, and on the exit of a corner, you're basically conceding the position every single time.
Perhaps, but there is good racing where there's good side by sides to 1, 2, 3 corners. There's a way to play, you know, in that scenario. I mean, we certainly don't see at IndyCar at 250 miles an hour someone running someone all the way up into the wall, right? Because they're trying an outside pass, because the peril is very high.
Right?
So it's I'm finding it difficult for me to say whether the penalty was right or not. Or everyone, are you blaming Perez for trying an outside pass? I personally thought Perez.
Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code play100. That's code play100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Showed himself early enough in the corner that Lando should have given him the room.
Yeah.
Because he had earned the right to be there, because he had made the outside pass so early in the corner. If you're doing it really late in the corner and Lando's there and he's all loaded up and he's just tracking out and all of a sudden Perez goes like this in the last third of the corner, then Perez has no right to be there. You've got to show yourself early. And the other person has to have a bit more respect for you dicing and not just say, well, what's he thinking? Passing on the outside there. He's thinking he's trying to race you, honestly.
Right. He's trying to pass.
So I don't necessarily love the fact that Lando's got a penalty, but I also don't love the fact that everyone thinks Lando had the right to do it, because I don't think he did.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation in the sense that there's all these different permutations and look at it. But if you just go back a year and a year before that with Lewis and Albon, Lewis punted Albon twice.
Right.
Now, it was interesting conversation back then because you had all these people on social media, excuse me, all these people on social media saying, well, no, I mean, look, Albon had a choice. You could either get hit, run out off into the gravel, or back out of it, and he should have backed out of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole different conversation now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why was it a couple of years ago, or, with these situations a couple of years ago, it was perfectly, well, if you're going to go on the outside, it's a low percentage chance anyway. You always got to realize, you're going to have to back out, and Lewis had the line, it's his corner, and they could have just backed out.
And it is going into passes like that, it's a low percentage and you can't, and you're hopeful you're going to pull it off, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
If I ever did something like that, I showed myself super, super early. Because if you, from the apex out, you've got no right to be there. But if you do get, then, and you judge who you're racing against, whether you try it or not. There's certain people you would never try that with, because they're just going to take you out. There's certain other people that go, okay, you got the better of me there, or I'll just get you back at the, later on in the lap, or later on in the race, or something like that. So it really depends on who you're racing against. Now, for the third incident, I actually thought Perez was trying to give Charles room. I thought it was an impressive move by Charles for sure, and I think Charles deserved to be on the outside there. And I think Perez was trying to give him enough room, but no more than enough room, and got it a little bit wrong. And as you see, he got a little bit crossed up or whatever. But I really think the third one was different from the first two.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like to me, and I don't know if he lost a back end and had to quickly adjust. I mean, on the onboard, it looked like he was steering right into Leclerc. That's not what he was doing. It's either the back end came around and he lost grip, or they may have touched a little bit and he was trying to keep it,
Yeah, I think by the time the moment happened there, I think it was already too late. I think Charles was already heading off. But he was. I think Perez was aware he was there, and I think he was trying to give him room the second time. But I think because of the history of this race and Perez in this race, they were just like, give him another penalty. He's doing it again. Yeah. So as I said, I think we want to see good racing. We want to see good side by side. We don't want it to be, if someone goes outside of you, they instantly just get shoved off the track. But there's also some that say as you said, that the person on the inside still has a right to battle and not make it easy, and elbows out, as I say, but you just, it's.
Yeah, I wanted to try to argue a couple different sides of this.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be on the fence, but I do want to, I think this issue is a lot easier said than done on just, they just need to fix that real quick. It is a little difficult. It's about the time, how much of your car is alongside, when you present, how you go into there. I certainly wouldn't expect to come and make a diving move on the outside and you're only like, 3/4 of a way up and all of a sudden you're supposed to concede the corner, but to your point, he was early, he was in, he was fully alongside, he's there, he's there. Do you give a little room? That's the intent, I think. Right. So, and is it fair to say, well, anytime you try to pass on outside, you got to realize you're probably going to lose. So it is what it is. So I don't know. Is that fair either, Yeah,
I don't think that's what we want to see. I think we want to see people try to make an outside pass if it's done properly and see people racing for the position that way.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's talk about the teams. First up, Red Bull, Max Verstappen, P1, Sergio Perez, P6. Max got his first Grand Slam, Paul, with pole position, led every lap, won the race, fastest lap, had the whole thing summed, and he did so in dominant fashion. Sure, I'm going to share a little kitty math with you. I did on this super, super expensive calculator that I got at Walgreens. Huh? Isn't that a jewel? Look at that. Do you have to
put batteries on that, or is that one of those newfangled?
Yeah, Paul, it's a Wexford. That's isn't there a place where you're from called Wexford? So there you go.
I'm sure there's a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So there you go. My kitty math tells me that by the end, Max was ahead of Valtteri Bottas by 18 seconds over 71 laps. That puts it at a 0.239-ish seconds per lap advantage. And that does comport with what Lewis said about Red Bull being 0.25 seconds a lap quicker. So, yes, that's stupid math, and that's math for idiots. But, hey, sounded good to me. But bottom line is Max, he said the car was absolutely hooked up. Both sets of tires, didn't matter what compound, absolutely hooked up. Drove a great race.
I was noticing something and I did see, not all of qualifying, but I did see Max's lap.
Yeah.
And, in Monaco, we were going through the swimming pool and you see the downforce to the left and right. Well, if you go on board and look in turn 7, is it 7, 8, or is it 6, 7? It's the long left with the quick right.
Yeah, is it 6, 7 maybe?
Yeah. But you looking at that car and its stability, its front and rear balance, but the immense amount of grip it had through that turn 6, that first segment, was mind blowing to me. I mean, you just saw I said it's a balance of overall grip, but the bounce on the front and the rear end. The front tires were just dug into the ground, but the back end was also, we couldn't see it, but I could see the front tires. I'm like, holy cow, that thing is just unbelievably hooked up. So yeah, go back, watch his lap and see that corner. That corner was like one of the ones that I think you can visually see all the downforce and grip working right there in that moment.
Yeah. And it's worth, because I know you were racing this weekend, if you get a chance to go back and look at Karun and Lando Norris talk about his qualifying lap at the Skypad.
Yeah.
Definitely go watch that.
Okay.
It's great. And Lando didn't mince any words. He just pretty much, said what he thought about the corner, and they went on his lap. Because Lando was ahead of Max the entire lap until the last corner.
Right. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it was really good, and I love the way that Lando was explaining how his approach to it and how he was doing corners and what Max was doing. It was a really interesting session.
Cool.
Really enjoyed it. Okay, next up, Sergio Perez.
You like my bass? You like it?
I'm not so sure about that.
Don't know. Well, he had a harder day. It was his 200th race, Paul, for the Mexican. It was a bit of a ragged race, first trying to overtake Lando on the outside. And if there's one thing we know about the youngsters, Paul, Leclerc, Lando, George, Esteban, etc., they don't just fold like a cheap tent. You know, those guys are all pretty darned aggressive, and they tend to be quite punchy when push comes to shove. So that move was always going to be perhaps a low percentage chance against Lando. Sergio perhaps thinking that this kind of pushing and shoving was okay because it took him 20 laps to give out a penalty for that. He returned the favor to Charles Leclerc. Charles was none too happy about the Mexican's hard elbows at that point. He was F-bombing and everything else and not happy. But in fairness to Sergio said he was not pleased with himself in his own actions, and he was apologetic. He apologized.
The Leclerc passes.
Yes.
Leclerc instance.
He was. I don't
think he apologized for the Lando thing.
No, he probably wasn't happy about that one. But for his actions against Leclerc, yes, he was not pleased with himself. Got a couple penalties, and for the one incident, like we said, it did appear that the rear had caused either that had that. Maybe they touched, and he had to.
Yeah, I think just that moment alone shows you he was kind of still trying to.
He was trying. I think he was. But Red Bull, nonetheless, come out of this weekend, 2 weekends on the trot, winning big points haul. They're 44 points ahead of Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship, and 32 points clear of Lewis. Max is 32 points clear of Lewis in the driver's title. So we've got a definite race on our hands as we head into Silverstone. That's for sure for Red Bull. Anything more to add to Sergio?
No, I think we kind of talked. I mean, it was ragged. He was off his game, I think, after that first incident. He looked really good. That if we made that move work, it would have been a 1-2 Red Bull, no doubt.
Yeah.
Instead, because it didn't work, he had a rough race the rest of the way.
For sure. Yeah. Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton, P4, Valtteri Bottas in P2. At first blush, Paul, you might have thought that the day might not look too bad for Mercedes when Sergio skipped off the track and through the gravel, thinking, hey, okay, so it may be Max, Lewis, and Bottas. But Lewis began losing time due to what the team said was damage from the sausage curbs, with Toto saying that it was up to 30 points of aero loss due to the sausage curves. So all of a sudden now you've got Lewis, who became a bit of a bottleneck for Bottas, and Finn was let past Lewis, but Lewis couldn't hold off Norris either. And he stopped again late for new tires to maybe try to get that fastest lap. He couldn't get it either. So he ended up down in fourth. So the damage maybe to that car a little more severe than what we thought, and which led social media to get all a light and a flame over the sausage curves. But surely, Paul, that's the same for everyone, right?
It is the same for everyone. And we're still searching for the right way to keep these track limits in check, right? I mean, you got, as we saw with the incident with Sergio and Leclerc, if you got gravel out there, it makes a mess, and the guy loop, that's actually pretty good. He didn't damage his car, but he sure lost a lot of time. And I've always said there just has to be consequences to going out of limits. But the damaging your car, I'm not sure that's what I'm looking for. You know, I mean, it seems very, I don't know, very 1980s to throw a big pile of concrete out there, to drive over.
Well, and it's
every track has its own different ways of doing it, so we don't have a consistent way to police the track limits. We got Paul Ricard where you can drive forever, and you just have to drive, do three circles around a pylon and go again, and you're good, Right. And then we got the extremes here, as if you go over that line,
you damage
your
car.
Off. But I like that better than obviously we always say the rule, if it's Monaco, it's a wall, right? And in Monaco, no one hit the wall, right? No. So there's a way of keeping your car within the limits. It's just how much peril out there are you willing to risk against. So if you go out there and that's the peril, then I guess you deserve what you get, I suppose.
Well, it was interesting in that lap review with Karun, Lando was talking about those curbs, and he was talking about how at certain turns, you use those curbs. Mm-hmm. He's using them to keep his car
right.
in. It catches the car. So they're all using. It's not just Lando. Lewis would have been doing it too. All of them would have been.
But then once you break that,
but if you get a little wrong and you get over it, all of a sudden you pay for it, and it's unfortunate because you're right. I mean, the last thing I want to see is Lewis trying to go for a race win, and so he's off a little bit on a curb, and then all of a sudden it destroys the bottom of his car. You don't want to see that either. But on the flip side, if you know it's going to destroy your car, then you got to stay off of them.
Right.
Just like the wall of Monaco, right?
Yeah, just like the wall of Monaco,
So that's difficult. He ends up down in P4, but he did make the comment that Lando's a damn good driver. He said that over the radio during the race, and I thought that's high praise coming from a 7-time champion. For Valtteri, he had a better day with a decent qualifying, better race. At one point when the team told him to hold station, I was wondering if he would actually do that for Lewis, but ultimately I think the team thought better of it. Lewis having damaged his car a little bit off the pace. They let him pass Lewis to claim second place. Toto made a decent point saying that the team's ultimate pace may not be as bad as it appeared, as they were stuck behind Lando for a good portion of the beginning of the race, and that cost them a lot of time trying to get back around Lando. Toto said that the team could see improvement in the race pace from last weekend, so they're making progress, but they do need to get their act together.
Yeah, I mean, Bottas was the only reason Bottas was allowed to pass Lewis was because of Lando.
Yes.
Under threat from Lando from behind. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have been able to hold station.
Yeah.
They knew that Bottas was going to get, Lando was catching, so they had to release him. So lucky for Valtteri, kind of, right? I mean, I think, with the damage to Lewis's car, it's hard to gauge the pace of what ultimately was there.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was anything different than what we were expecting going in anyway.
Yeah, right.
I just don't. I think Bottas kind of showed the pace, but I think the Red Bull was superior, and Mercedes had nothing for him. And for Bottas to get second, Lewis to get a fourth, probably they'd hope for at least a second or third. Not too bad in damage limitation before they get to some circuits that hopefully they'll be able to show, be ahead of the Red Bull and claw some of those points back.
Right. Let's talk about McLaren.
Nice, Ron.
You got Lando Norris down in P3, Daniel Ricciardo in P7. Lando had another terrific race. Made the most out of their straight line speed they had, which was really pretty impressive on balance. If you look at all those DRS attempts that Lewis was trying to set him up, struggling to get around that McLaren. So very impressive at the Red Bull Ring on top straight line speed. He fought that, but
Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code PLAY100. That's code PLAY100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Even though he got past, Paul, he fought the top teams all day long. When he radioed early on, asking, well, how hard do you want me to try to fight the Mercedes and keep him behind? I was glad that the team didn't tell him to fold like a cheap tent. You know,
Like
he hung
week.
in there. Yes, right. I'm glad that they kind of let him run, because that, in my mind, secured a podium. And he was there or thereabouts all day long. I got to tell you, just as a Yankee on this side of the pond, reading just the outpouring of social media praise and everything going on around what Lando did this weekend, add that to what he's done so far all year long. I got to tell you, the buzz, the press, I think the UK has a new hero to cheer for in Lando, much maybe to George and Lewis's chagrin. And despite some of the press saying, "Oh, this is really encouraging from Lando. This is really good news for what we might see in the future." I got news for you, folks.
He's
Lando, George, Max, Charles, Carlos, Esteban, Pierre, they're here now. This isn't, Lando's not a glimpse of what he might develop to in the future. Lando is sending it.
Yeah, he just needs the tool to send it in. And McLaren, luckily, for him, I mean, good for Zach to tie Lando up, because he's definitely showing his speed now that and McLaren are backing up that speed by giving him a good car. Not necessarily every race, but it was a spectacular drive from him and from, and once you can never forget the team have to give him the car to do it with, right? I think he's been a pretty darn good driver since the day he came into Formula One. Yeah, and he's definitely matured, which you can't rush that. Right. But I love hearing him in the car, because he's very calm.
He is.
I mean, he's literally chatting like he is on his Twitch account when he's in the car, which means he's within himself. He's getting the most out of the car, but he's not panting for breath doing it. I
like it because he's kind of cheeky. He's cheeky too. And they said, "Well, you got a penalty." He goes, "For what?" They said, "Well, Perez." He goes, "Well, he was on the outside. That was a stupid move. That was never going to work."
Yeah. So whatever. Said, whatever.
Yeah,
Flushed it off. But and then you have to look at his teammate. I mean, Ricciardo is not any slouch, and I think Ricciardo is going to come back, and he's just struggling for some reason with this car in this new first year with McLaren. But there's no doubt that Norris is one of those top guys that's going to be here for a long time. And luckily for McLaren, he signed up to drive for them.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I would think that George Orlando in one of those Mercedes would be a lethal weapon, either one of them. But Lando is here. That's not I was reading that article and said, "Oh, it's a really good sign for the future." I'm like, no. He's here. He's now. He's been in Formula One a couple of years. He's cut his teeth. He's already done the silly stuff. He's here now, and he's ready to roll. And conversely, so is George, to be fair. Let's talk about Dan. Dan turned a poor qualifying around, gained several places to start. Dan fought hard during the race. While he couldn't hold off Perez or Sainz, Sainz was on much fresher tires, and he just couldn't hold him off. He did manage to keep Leclerc behind him. That's important in their battle with Ferrari, and keeps McLaren, ahead of Ferrari by 19 points in the Constructors' Championship. Good to see Dan. Look, if qualifying is still a struggle, good to see the race pace is there, still putting in some good moves, and seems, I would say, on balance, seemed to really make some progression this weekend, and let's hope that continues.
Yeah, the qualifying is just putting him on his back foot every time, and I think he maximized what he could do, because to get that far up in places, you've got to do something different. You got to use that car up in certain aspects just to get that far up in the places. So he just didn't have a knife left to fight with at the end, but he did manage to hold off Leclerc, who's also kind of doing nearly the same thing, it seemed. He's just got to somehow get there first thing on Friday and be in tune with that car, because it does seem to ebb and flow a little bit, and so he's inconsistent. Sometimes he feels like he's there, sometimes not. So it's hard to judge progress, right?
It is.
Because it's not like every race he's kind of edging up, because sometimes he's dropping down too. So it's an all round getting his head around the car and how it works at every different type of track, and how the setup needs to be, and how he needs to drive it. Lando's got that experience, and he's showing that the car can be there, but Ricciardo just needs to unlock that little secret.
Yeah. All right, Ferrari, Charles Leclerc P8, Carlos Sainz in P5. After a poor qualifying performance again, it was another decent recovery, and this would suggest that maybe Ferrari's race pace is certainly better than their qualifying pace, or at least at this track it has been. Carlos started on the hard compounds, and this was probably the better of the two options for them, and he was able to make hay with that. With the much fresher tires, as they did a long stint, had fresh tires at the end, he was able to get back up, get around Dan, and he inherited fifth when Perez was penalized. So a good result, really, for Carlos, 2 times on the trot, a good run up to fifth.
Yeah, it seems to be, talking about consistency, it seems to be always the case with Carlos, right? He just can't, the last third of the race, it all kind of comes together, and here's Carlos, he's knocking people down. He's moving up the places right at the end.
Yeah.
It seems like Ferrari running these split strategies the whole time, but Sainz seems to be able to make it work a bit better, or maybe that kind of strategy just works with how he drives. But he's kind of like very low key. And then the last third, it's like, where's Carlos Sainz come from? And here he comes, charging the front. Yeah.
It is interesting about Carlos. Carlos is delivering. He's gelled. He's a hell of a race car driver.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easy to overlook if he's got a quiet race, But what he's doing there, if you look at those split strategies, it always looks like, not taking anything away from Charles, but it always looks like Charles trying to pull that strategy out of his ass.
Yes,
and Carlos is just executing it, So, and I'm not saying that Carlos always gets like a better strategy or anything, because it's hard to know which is going to be the better. But man, what both of them are executing in Carlos's case and just quietly marching up the field, and what Charles is doing, just sheer talent and just pace.
Mr. Excitement,
Mr. Excitement, is just impressive. Charles had a tougher day than Carlos, and certainly getting beaten up twice by Perez, that didn't help. Got punted twice off the track, still managed to get up to 8th. And, he was upset. He had every right to be. He thought he could have got a lot higher had he not had those incidents. I'd agree with him. But in the end, he said that he and Perez talked. They cleared the air. He understood it's a racing deal. But anyway, it is exciting to watch Charles try to pull that strategy out of his butt. And a testament to him, he's putting that car in a position probably didn't have a business being in.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I think you're right. Out of the butt seems to be a good analogy.
Yeah.
He's always got to make something work. He's got to make those passes work quick to make everything work. And I'm sure, and he's fun to watch. And he does. He's got some great racecraft, and he does make it work half the time, unless you're racing against Perez, I guess. But it's Ferrari are just clawing their way back, and I think they're doing a pretty good job of still getting points on the board with their chase with McLaren. I think it's been a hard fought thing all year long. But yeah, two different races always, it seems, those two drivers have. Sure.
But this is a good battle, and I don't mean to patronize you by saying this, but you've got 4 drivers battling for the best of the rest. That's a really good race going on every single weekend. If you watch Charles and Carlos versus Dan and Lando, this is a great battle. It really is, and it's fun. It's been fun to watch. All right, let's talk about AlphaTauri. Pierre Gasly in P9, Yuki Tsunoda P12. Very quiet race for Pierre, delivering again in an AlphaTauri. Pierre and Yuki both started on the soft compounds and ran in the top 10 early on. Both dropped down the field after their first stop, but Pierre Paul was able to fight back, to get back up into the top 10, claimed a point, important for them. And to be fair to him, he's putting a hell of a lot of pressure on Leclerc and just ran out of laps. I think he would have had him. He had fresher tires. Probably would have had Charles if he had a couple extra laps. But again, Pierre quietly delivering another great race.
Yeah. The strategy was weird. They were really, with that first stop, they were really had to do a lot of work to get back up. And
exactly,
we know that uses equipment up and tires and everything like that just to make that work. So I'm not sure it was a keen strategy for them, but Pierre's always there fighting. He's consistently just making the most out of the car and the opportunity. So Yuki obviously for P12 wasn't so bad. I think he kind of inherited a couple of positions there on that last lap, mind you, because of Raikkonen and Vettel. But
he had those 2 penalties.
Yeah, he was never gonna come back from that. He's at least this week anyway. He didn't fly off the road or do anything silly. So, although penalties like this is pretty silly also. Part of the learning experience, right?
It is. Well, yeah, certainly the first time. I think the second time it starts to get a little silly. Let's see. Alpine, Fernando Alonso, P10, Esteban Ocon, a DNF. Not really his fault. He finished his race on the first lap, was meat sandwich. He was the meat in a Schumacher Giovinazzi sandwich.
No one wants to have that.
Nobody wants that. It's one of those deals, Paul. It's hard to really blame anyone. It's 3 cars. He was in the middle, nowhere to go, damaged his front right suspension, ended his race, brought out the safety car in lap 1. Hard to get too hard on Esteban on that. But for Alonso, still steaming about being balked in quali by Vettel, he actually wrung the neck of that Alpine, hunted George Russell down, robbed the Williams driver of his first points in F1 for Williams by nipping him there in the waning laps to claim P10. Considering where they started and what happened to Ocon, Alonso's 10th is probably about as good as you could hope for, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, the battle with George was great, and luckily there was a lot of coverage for it, right? I know it was only for 10th, and no one, thinks Alonso should be fighting out for 1 point, but at least he doesn't give up, right?
No.
And I think it was, those two get along. They've got, you've seen pictures of them together and exchanging helmets, so I think they were both really enjoying it, but it was a real chess match. I mean, Alonso's got a lot of tools in his box,
He does.
And for George to be able to hold Alonso off for that long was quite something, I think, know. And so I thought it was a really, really super race. And when we're talking about do you have to run someone off the road? Well, no, you don't, because you saw how these guys raced.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, a lot of respect for both those drivers. Respect each other quite a bit, and Fernando felt horrible after. He goes, anybody but George.
Yeah, but he's never going to give it up, right?
He's not going to give it up.
George is going to have to earn it, man.
Yeah. Fernando, I'm sure he felt bad, but Fernando's not going to give the point up. If he's got it, it's there, he's going to take it.
He's not built that way.
No, he's not built that way. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about George and Williams. George Russell in P11, Latifi down in P15. George had a great weekend, Paul. A great qualifying session. Got into Q3 on merit. Fantastic effort by him. Was heading for his first points finish. He dropped down early on in the race, then fought back, was getting in the points, running in 10th. Alonso got around, stole that glory in the final laps. George, understood that. But George and Williams both, Paul, seem to be making progress, and that's great news. As George does even more to really steal that seat from Valtteri Bottas next year. But apart from George, good news for the team and the car itself. Now, maybe this is track specific, but there's probably going to be a couple other tracks that might suit this Williams car, and they're making some progress. I think that's good news.
Yeah, I mean, as we've said for a long time, it's like, the really good drivers can still do something with average cars.
Yeah.
Not all the time, not every race we can, but when the car's a bit better, they shine, and that's exactly what Russell does. He's earned every right to be in that Mercedes seat. I'm sorry, I would be very upset if he doesn't get that ride.
Oh my gosh, I'd be stunned.
Yeah.
If
I can see George outside Toto's house with his cup going along the fence, just staring at it. Cape Fear, like I'd be that mad if I was him. He's earned it, man. I mean, he does. Yeah,
and everybody's kind of like, well,
free George.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to, do that, because there's a real harmony and a balance with Valtteri and Lewis, and you don't want to. Oh, the hell with Lewis! Come on, he's a 7-time champion. If he can't handle George, then what?
Yeah, exactly.
He's a 7-time champion. Yeah. Lewis is a hell of a driver. He's got it covered. He's a big boy. He's fine.
Yeah, exactly. He is, and Mercedes need to be thinking about their future, and their future is not. I'm sorry, it's just not Valtteri Bottas to lead the team. So.
Right, and long term, it's not Lewis. It is for 2 years. They've just re-signed him for 2 years. That's awesome. Lewis is a freaking 7-time champion. He's a hell of a driver. One of the best of his generation. He's got this. Don't worry about little George coming in and upsetting Lewis. Lewis is fine.
Yeah, and Valtteri has had plenty of time, opportunity to do something.
But what you got to do is think beyond Lewis, and you got to think George. You got to think people that will take that mantle forward. And you got to get him. And what better understudy than Lewis Hamilton? Right. For George to get in and run with Lewis? I mean, what better way to learn from a 7-time champion? You kidding me?
Yeah, but George is not going to play second fiddle to Lewis.
He will not.
He's a nice guy, but he's not going to do that. No,
he will not. And that is the difference. Mm-hmm. That's what's, when they get in there and they start trying to cram down on him like they did with Valtteri, that dog don't hunt. Not with George. He's there to win. No. He's there to win championships. And I might add, so is Lewis Hamilton. Because he didn't, oh no, gotta stay behind Fernando. And Lewis said, well, the hell with that. Ain't happening.
Right.
So for Nick, don't know what to tell you, buddy. Your car's running a lot better than P15, but you're not. So it's unfortunate. If you got George nipping at the points and you're languishing at the back, Nick's got to raise his game.
Yep.
All right, Aston Martin, Lance Stroll. Gosh, going from what he did last week to this week in P13, Sebastian Vettel P17, not all of his own making. Lance and Seb started on the soft compounds, Paul. That was always going to be tough, as we saw with AlphaTauri. So this meant that they had that early stop. Now, they had clawed their way up, in fairness to both cars. They took advantage of that soft rubber, clawed their way up into the top 10, but then as the tires started wearing, they started to fall back into the clutches, the midfield. By their first stop, they were back in traffic. That really made it difficult for Lance to get back up and perform like he did last weekend. Yep. That softer rubber, I think, was really a difficult tire for this car, Paul. Yeah. And then Seb got punted by Kimi on the last lap, which is really odd.
Yeah, they definitely can't maximize the softer rubber. I think that's definitely something about that. But it was an average so-so race for these guys. They had some flourishes in the race.
They did.
Ultimately, the strategy just put them in a place that they didn't have enough car to fight their way back through with.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they'd have been much better off going medium hard,
Yeah, I think for sure.
Yeah, because, they ended up having to do a two-stopper. I mean, by the time they were gotten that traffic, they said, oh, hell, roll the dice and let's go two-stopper. But,
And we've seen that car works better when it runs longer in that first stint.
Mm-hmm.
That's their strong point.
Yeah.
So that's they need to just kind of focus on that, I think.
Yeah, they have probably been better off going hard medium.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's see. Alfa Romeo, Kimi Räikkönen P16, Antonio Giovinazzi down P14. Antonio got caught up in that first lap incident with Ocon again. Difficult to start pointing fingers at this point. It was just one of those Ocon sandwiches. But that meant he had to box at the end of lap 1. That put him at the back, and then he had to struggle all day to try to get back up to the points. P14 is as good as he can do. And what happened with Kimi there? He ran on the hards again, like he did last week. Ran that long first stint, had the fresh tires at the end, and then he left a little bit of an opening. Vettel took it, and then he just said, well, the hell with that. And it was, I don't know what happened. And I read his post-race comments. He's like, I had the incident with Vettel, and that was the end of the race. Well, but why?
Well, all I can see is he didn't see him, or he lost his width perception or something. Yeah. But definitely he wasn't expecting Vettel to dive on the inside. So actually Vettel was charging up at that point, and so was Kimi. But I don't know what he did. He just misjudged it. Yeah. He either didn't see him or just misjudged the width of the car. But it was a pretty bad error.
Yeah, and Vettel didn't go ballistic on Kimi either. He just said, it just it kind of happened, and I don't think Kimi intended that, but it just kind of happened. And then finally, we're down with Gunther. And Haas F1, Mick Schumacher P18, Mazepin, and P19. Mick once again had the best of Nikita for the 8th time this year, as the duo spent the day at the back of the grid trying to stay out of trouble. That's about all I have for them.
Yep. Just rolling, letting the season roll on.
That's it, man. Just rolling on. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think they should have Gunther as the interviewee because he's got nothing to say. What are you going to say?
What are you going to say?
How things going? And how do you even make up a question to ask him? So, how are things going back there? Yeah, that's shit. Yeah, we're just not even racing. We're just showing up so we don't lose our start money or whatever it is they get. So
yeah, it's just like, okay, all right, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with you. They need to do Christian or where's Toto? Get Toto's butt on that.
Yeah, get Toto back on there.
Yeah, come on.
He's under pressure now. Maybe he doesn't want to.
Yeah, maybe. All right, let's do some awards. First, the move of the race. Woo! Get down. All right, move of the race, Paul. Who do you have?
I'm going with Charles Leclerc for the up and under on Perez. I thought that's how you get it done, my friend.
That's exactly how you get that done.
Showed himself on the outside. The other car goes in deep to try and cover that and then just jump to the inside. It was an awesome move.
Totally agree with you. I'm going with the Dutch fans.
Ooh.
My gosh, that was impressive. Was it not?
I thought they were McLaren fans.
I thought
Lando kept saying it was McLaren fans.
Yeah, I was like,
hilarious.
It's good to see all that orange for McLaren. It was hilarious. Yeah. My gosh, that is great. 132,000 people back at this race. Great to see all the fans back at a race. And then all of that sea of orange for Max is just impressive as hell. It's just super impressive to see.
Yep.
And you could hear them no matter whose mic was hot during the broadcast. They're down on Christian in the pit wall. You can hear him in the back. He's in the pit, is amazing. You could hear him everywhere. It was just amazing.
And he delivered. Wait till he go to Zandvoort.
Oh my gosh.
That's going to be nuts.
That'll be insane. Yes. Yes. All right. So the next award is always Donkey of the Race. Woo!
We'll do it live.
All right, Paul. Donkey of the Race.
Who could it be? Perez.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give it to the stewards.
Oh, you're going to give it to Derek Warwick. I say he was the next one in line, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to the stewards. Good grief. Come on.
Yeah.
He had 11 people that had to go see Principal Warwick and, get their hands slapped, get their paddling. Come on, man. And now everybody's got, so they handed out, 19 points, penalty points on licenses this weekend.
Yeah, I think the penalty point thing, I'm just like, come on.
They got to figure that out.
Yeah, you don't. The penalty points is a little over the top.
Yeah, agreed. All right, and then finally, drive of the race. Good God. Oh, yeah, Paul. Drive of the race. Who'd you give it to?
Got to give it to Lando, man.
Absolutely.
I know Max had a great car and a great drive, flawless drive, but Lando, once again,
yeah, absolutely.
Getting in top three.
Yeah, certainly, there's been many times when Lewis just won from from lights out and cruised to victory, and I didn't give him a drive of the race, and it was a brilliant drive. It was Max's, but boy, drive of the race for me, it got to be Lando. Qualifying, second, getting up, battling, getting around Lewis, albeit a damaged car, then really threatening. He was within a second of Valtteri. It looked like he might threaten Valtteri. So running with the leaders at this race, impressive as hell.
Very much.
And it's great. All right, let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
All right, so Mr. Jury was asking about the whole, the conflicting rules about the Austrian Grand Prix. You're allowed to hold your racing line. It seems some races the commentators are all about leaving a car's width, and other times they'll hold the racing line, and no one can decide. And hopefully our conversation at the beginning of this podcast kind of answered that. I think a lot of this, I don't want to rehash that and go through it again, but just rewind and listen to the beginning of the podcast, because I think we addressed that. Hopefully we did. If we didn't, go to the mailbag, let us know what you're thinking there. But I think...
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of differing opinions. I get it.
Yeah, I think there is. Certainly, if you're watching the broadcast, Sky Sports, they had a lot of different opinions. I think I've read a lot of F1 journalists, some of them very broad opinions. Well, if you go to the outside, it's a low percentage pass and you get what you pay for. I think Paul, really tried to parse it out a little better than that, in the sense of saying a lot of it depends on when you present yourself and where you're at. It's based on entering the corner, based on exiting the corner. There's just a lot of permutations to keep and consider. One thing I will say, Paul, to his point here, and you brought it up, and Grace and I have talked about this in the past quite a bit. You can't penalize outcomes.
Right.
Penalizing outcomes doesn't work. You have to either be consistent and penalize the action, regardless of the outcome, or don't. But if the outcome is, oh man, he ran wide, and that's going to make the race less exciting, we need to penalize that. You can't do that crap.
Right.
They've either got to be penalties for everyone or they're penalties for no one. But that's why you're seeing the inconsistency. Because you're like, oh, crap, that was a terrible outcome. They deserve a penalty. No, it doesn't work that way.
That's not what we wanted to see.
No.
Yeah.
That's not what I wanted for this race. We're going to penalize them. You can't do that crap.
No.
All right? So stop it. All right, Shumi in Toronto has this question for you, Paul. I've noticed that all the teams cover their cars with a car cover while the cars sit in the garage overnight. Is this mandated by the FIA? I know there was a strict curfew that the cars can't be worked on after hours, and security cameras always running to enforce this. Are these car covers part of that? It's hard to believe that they're simply dust covers. What do you think? If memory serves correctly, I thought, and I could be confusing the cover over the gearbox and engine when they're in transport. I think there is an FIA seal on those. Yeah. And you can't break that seal without getting a penalty. I don't recall if the total car cover at the end of the evening has an FIA safety seal on that or not.
Yeah, definitely if you're in Parc Fermé conditions, like between qualifying and the race, there is absolutely a cover and a seal, and you can't change anything on the car without asking permission for this or that.
Right.
And I think, there's also limitations on when you can work on the car, right? When that ends, once again, I'm sure that that cover is used for that purpose also. And if you need to do something else, you have to ask permission. And so you have to go through the right deal. So
my hunch is that they do seal them up in the cover and put a seal on it. Because
it also protects them from other teams coming in and fiddling around. My dad was telling me a story the other day, and this is IMSA in the 80s, right? And they were racing a Porsche, and there was a lot of other people racing Porsches as well, and this was the Moby Dick car at Daytona. And he says, they were left for the evening, and then my dad came back for something, and then he walks in the garage and he sees these two legs underneath the car. And he yanks the person out, and it's John Paul Sr. So if anyone that knows IMSA, they know John Paul Sr. John Paul Jr. was a good friend of mine and sadly died recently. So there was a lot of that going on in between in the night. And I don't know what he was doing. He was either trying to break something or he was just trying to see something under there. But either way, my dad yanked him out and threw him out of the garage. So it helps out with that too.
He's over there with a razor blade cutting just a little cut in the brake line.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's good news. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. You've got a reprieve, Paul. It's a couple of weeks until Silverstone, so you're off duty. We'll get Grace back next week and start talking nonsense about news in Formula One. But in the meantime, stop by the website, theparcferme.com. Share your opinion. Do it with decorum and civility. If you like the podcast, go over to iTunes and give us some love. Give us a good rating over there. Also, a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters who are out there and listening and watching. And we could not do this without you. We would not do this podcast without you. It's been 16 years now, Paul, that we've been covering Formula One, and we could not do it without our Patreon supporters at all. So anyway, thank you so much. I'm incredibly grateful for all of your support and for all of you supporting us on those monthly PayPal support as well. All of you, thank you so much for your support. Until the next time, Paul, it's been great. Congratulations on the 2 podium results at the Glen. That's exciting. Your next race is when?
Lime Rock in 2 weeks.
Lime Rock in 2 weeks. IMSA, be looking for the number 3 Aston Martin. That is where Paul is. So you can watch that at Lime Rock for the Harder Racing Team number 23, led by your friend and all-around swell guy, Ian James.
That's right. Good old friend. Decades-old friend.
Decades-old friend, Ian James. Awesome guy. So anyway, all right, folks, until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over. It's not what I feel I've got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out what it was like to drive a car fast, to drive on a certain circuit, to drive a certain type of car.
Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code play100. That's code play100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.